Hello and welcome to Immediate Immersion Live. Are you struggling with classroom management? Do you want to create a positive language learning environment that fosters engagement and success? Well, you're in the right place. Today, I'm going to reveal the ultimate classroom management hacks that will revolutionize your teaching experience. Get ready to transform your language teaching game. My name is Scott, and you're watching Immediate Immersion Live, where we're all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. How's everybody doing today? This is my last week before I go back to school next week. I can't believe my summer is over. Where did it go? Today, I'm so excited to talk to you about my 5 classroom management hacks. And not all of them are ones you normally think of. So we're going to try some different ones today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to fill them in the comment section in the chat. And if you're watching this on the replay, please put them in the comments and I'll be sure to answer them for you. My little Ampelman is green, and so he's disappearing off my chest today. So sorry about that. Okay, so what do we want to talk about today? So the first thing I want to talk about is classroom layout. This is such an important thing that many of us don't give much conscious thought to the layout. So a couple things you want to think about. You want to think about ingress and egress. That's entering in the classroom and exiting the classroom, especially in an emergency situation. Is everybody able to easily get in and out of the classroom from wherever they might be seated? That's number 1. Number 2, you need to make sure that no matter where they're seated, that they have a clear view to your teaching area, wherever that might be, whether it might be a board or a screen, whatever you use in your classroom. 3, you want to make sure that you have access to everybody in the room within 2 to 3 steps. You don't want to have your rows so deep that you can't get to a student, whether you need to take action because something bad is going on, or whether they need assistance for other thing, maybe a health thing that's coming on. You want to make sure that you can get to where you need to be. Also, you want to consider, is your layout helping or hindering off-task behaviors? So proximity is that one thing. You want to be able to get to those students. That's one thing. But for me, one of the things I did, it was like 2016, I think I made the change, is to get rid of my desks. We don't do a heck of a lot of writing where they need desks for a whole time. So I have clipboards for that. But I took the desks away. And I remember specifically, I've been wanting to do it for years. And then my assistant principal, who's in charge of, classrooms and all the materials and furniture, said no. But I was at a conference with my principal, and he had come into one of the sessions with me, and it was Alina Filipescu who was talking about how she got rid of her desks. And I said, this is what I really would like to do. And he said, why don't you do it? I said, because assistant principal said no. He goes, give me a minute. He texted the custodians. He goes, your desk will be out of your room by the end of the day. So that was in the summertime at our conference. And so when I came back to school, my desks were removed, and it was wonderful. I know not all of you can do that, but if you can, it's a great change. Why? Number one, It removes barriers between you and the student. Normally there's a desk or a table there, and that's, 1.5, 2 feet of distance that separates you from that student. And then if you have multiple rows, you've got that 1.5 to 2 feet of the desk or table. Then you have the student, and then you have some space, and then you have 1.5 to 2 feet of a desk or table, and then another student, and you might even have 3 rows back. That potentially could be 6 or more feet from the person in the back row. So that's problematic. It's also a physical barrier to communication. When we talk to people, we don't normally talk over a table. We approach people, we don't get in their space, but, we're close enough when we communicate. And our classes should be room full of communication. And so we want to make sure that the layout that we choose helps that and makes it more possible. Also, it is extremely hard for a student to hide a cell phone that they are texting on or playing a video game on when there's no desk. It was wonderful when that happened, because now it's so obvious when a kid is trying to hide a cell phone. They'll bring their legs up and put their feet on the chair and squat like a frog and put them behind there. Or they'll bring their backpack up on their lap and start texting behind there. But those are so obvious. Not only that, their head is cranked down to what they're doing. So obvious. The kids of before the iPhone were better at texting than the kids now. Even though they had, Text9 texting? Is that what it was called? I could never do it. Where you had to tap each number a couple of times to get to the right letter. I had kids that were so talented in doing that, didn't have to look. They just knew, and they knew click 222 and this one and this one and this one a couple of times, and they could get their text messages out. That was never me. I was never texting back in those days. I did not start texting until many years later when actual keyboards were on the screens. So it inhibits that. So when I have no desks, that allows for me to be able to see what my kids are doing. So if they're not on task, I can see it right away because there's nothing for them to hide behind. Plus, the desks that we used in my middle school where I currently teach are different than the desks I used at high school. In high school, our desks were attached to the chair and they were more like college. So I would not have been able to get rid of those without buying chairs. But in my middle school, my desk was separate from my chair, and my desk had a cubby in it that they could shove things in. And did they ever shove things in? I found food and wrappers and garbage, all this kind of crap that there was no reason to be in there, and they used them for that. So by me getting rid of the desks, I got rid of that. I got rid of that awful smell from rotting food that I didn't realize was in there. It just saved a whole lot of options for me. So I love my deskless classroom. Now, layouts beyond that, even if you have to use desks or tables or just chairs, you have a couple of different formats. You can do classic rows, which I almost always advise against. It's too traditional, and we want kids to realize that this class is different. It's not a traditional type of class. It's not a lecture type class. That the rows is how you set it up for lectures or for classic exams like SAT exams. They require it to be all in those rows because it's easy to monitor who's looking where. So I don't advise that. I prefer one of two layouts for me. The first are rows, but only 2 or 3, And instead of them facing forward towards the board, they're facing towards the middle. And in that middle is my teaching zone and my acting zone. So we have stories would go in there. That's one way. The negatives of that is probably to fit 30 chairs in there or 30 desks, you have to have at least 3 rows. 3 rows and 5 columns. So you get 15 on each side. That makes it difficult to be able to get to that last kid in that far corner on either side. It's a lot of kids to get through. And I remember when I was teaching in Las Vegas, where it was not unheard of that I would have a class load of 270 some students, almost 300 per year that I would see throughout the day. So some of those classes were over 40 students. And I remember having that set up. I had to have 4 rows on each side to be able to fit all my kids. And one of my kids so far back in the corner, and my rows had to be no more than 8 inches apart from each other. I had to get a ruler to fit them all in. And he was really upset and explained to me that, he was scared to be in that spot. And I didn't understand where he was getting with this, but I guess he survived a house fire. And he knew that he had so many minutes to get out of a building during a fire before the smoke succumbs them. And he knew being that far back and having to get through 4 rows of kids and then getting out to the door and then getting out of the building, he probably wasn't going to have a chance. So I did move him, but I also implored him to talk to the principal about these class sizes. And it's partly was enabled by state law. In Nevada, unlike like California where I live, the maximum person count is by room. So they look at the room, they figure how many people can fit in there, and they put a max person count for the room. In Nevada, it doesn't go by room, it goes by building. And so our school building was partially indoor and partially a quad. But the walls of the quad were an extension of the indoor building. So they counted that as part of the building. So I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number and say, 4,000 people could be in this building. And it didn't matter to the fire people if all 4,000 were in one classroom or they were spread out over the room, because the way the law was written, it is by building and not by room. So it was very dangerous. So that was the problem with the going facing forward. But sometimes that was the best that I could do with as many desks that I had. It was the best arrangement, the compromise I could make. The one that I prefer and I currently use is the horseshoe or the semicircle. So I only have 2 rows now, and I have 34 desks in my classroom, which is the max I can have in a class at one time. But I am only allowed to have a total of 170 students. So if I have 34 kids in one class, I'm going to have a smaller other class to get it all to work out. But regardless, I only have 2 rows that go around in a horseshoe or semicircle, and it works much better. I've got the huge center area for my teaching area and my story area when we act out stories. I am no more than 1 row away from any child, because I do walk behind the row. I can walk completely around the whole horseshoe with no problem. And so I'm always no more than 1 row from a student if they need help or if something goofy is going on that I need to interact with. So that makes it much better. I can also get closer to my students when I'm talking to them, when I'm having conversations and I'm walking around the room. I can get close to them so we can have a conversation. So That's one of the major things, is having the appropriate layout so that you can interact with your kids, not only for classroom engagement, but also for classroom management and emergency situations. And when kids are actively engaged, because you can be in the proximity of them, they are less likely to cause behavior problems. And when they do, let's say we're doing silent reading, I don't sit at my desk when I silent read. I walk around the room slowly. But if I notice a kid's not reading, they've got the book upside down, they're hiding an English book behind their Spanish book, doing anything other than reading what they're supposed to be reading, I just mosey on over. I still read my book, and I just plant myself near them. And I can do that because I have full access all the way around the classroom. I'm only one row away from a student, and I can just move to where I need to move, stand there, and read. And if that's not working, if they don't really notice I'm just standing there, then I can just casually look at them and wait for them to comply with what they're supposed to be doing. Also, I forgot another benefit for having a deskless classroom. I can manipulate the chairs really, really quickly. So it makes it really, really easy for me to manipulate the chairs exactly how I want. If I need a new configuration, or if kids need to pair up, or if I want small groups, it can be done really easily, and the kids can put the chairs back. I number my chairs so they know what order they're supposed to be in, and we can't put tape on the floor. An exception was allowed during the pandemic when we had to have our chairs so far apart, but they don't like it because it destroys the carpet. So what I do is I just use chalk, because chalk will just, it just moves away off the carpet really easily. I put chalk lines for where the upper left leg goes of each chair, so they know how to fill the rows up, and it gets them perfect every time. Because otherwise chairs tend to migrate. Even with desks, my whole thing tends to migrate. I don't know how it happens, but chairs and desks move somehow mysteriously throughout the day. So that's the layout, and it's one of the key things for classroom management. People don't think that their layout of their desks has anything to do with classroom management, but it so much does, because you need to be able to get to where you have an issue, and you want to be able to be proximate to your students when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Next, music. This is another one that people don't think about. When I wanted to come up with these classroom management hacks, everybody knows the typical ones. So I wanted to look at ones that were less common, lesser known. And music is one that is very important. Music plays a big role in students' lives, and it's very emotional. Depending on the type of music that you play, that can invoke certain emotions, whether it be calmness that you want or excitability that you want. But kids will calm down with certain types of music, and other music will energize them if that's what you need. I have my personal playlist. I make a school playlist to make sure there's no inappropriate, songs in there, that I play when my kids are walking into class and starting their warm-up. So I'm outside my classroom, which is where classroom management starts. I'm greeting my students as they walk into the classroom, but there is music playing. Now, I don't play music appropriate to the language I teach. So I teach Spanish, so I don't have Hispanic music playing. I have my personal playlist that I listen on my own time. Why? Because it lets kids know who I am, at least musically, what my music taste is. Some kids gravitate to that music. Some kids don't like that music. But either way, they get a little insight into who I am. And I'm only playing it, while kids are walking into class, and then it stops once class starts. During a warm-up, I might play classical music. Usually, especially for me, and I'm sure other students are like me, I can listen to music that doesn't have words in it if I'm working with words. So if I'm writing things down, or if I am writing things down or reading, I can't have words going through my head in music. I have to have wordless music, like classical music, because the words from music interfere with the words I'm reading or writing. So classical music can be used to calm kids down during a warm-up. They might even appreciate classical music during silent reading. Some kids may like that, some may not. You can use music for transitions. So you can set up a playlist of short, like 20-second pieces of music, and they have to get to the next activity before that music ends, whatever it be. I know one teacher used to have, what did they sang the numbers, but to the beat of the Happy Days theme song. And I can't remember it. The 1 o'clock rock, that one. They did that, but they did it in saying the numbers in Spanish. So they counted in song to that beat. And when they got to, I think it was 20, they all had to be ready for the next activity, whatever that might be. So it kept the kids in the target language. There was a musical component with it, and it gave them a sense of urgency of what needed to happen by the end of that piece of music. So you can set up a series of 20-second clips of songs that you can play to gear kids up for certain transition. And you can even assign this 20-second song is always for the transition to this. And that one is always a transition to that. So kids can learn when they hear the music, they know what's coming next based on that. But using music to regulate the mood of the class, the emotion of the class, the energy of the class, to regulate transitions, and to play some background music while they are working can really help keep the management issues to a minimum. Next, let's talk about challenges. There are so many challenges that could come up during the year in a class. There are so many different kid personalities. There are so many different issues kids face today. There are so many anxieties kids face today. There are so many problems kids face today. There's a lot going on in kids' lives, more so than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, our generation, a generation before. And we don't understand all of these. So my first approach, whenever there's a classroom management issue that comes up, is to have a private conversation. If my first, what do I want to say? First, like I'm losing my English. My first attempt to fix the problem, I can't remember what word I'm trying to look for there, doesn't work. So, my first thing, let's say a kid is, it's not the whole class, it's one or two kids are having side conversations. So I'm going to look at them and maybe even walk towards them. If that doesn't stop it, I may ask them to go step outside for a moment. Now, I train my kids when I go outside, if we're not doing an independent activity that they can work on their own, if I'm doing active teaching, like a story or something like that, they can't continue that without me. So they know to get their silent reading book out and read. That's one of the procedures I set up with my students from the beginning of the year. So when I leave the room and they're not working independently or pair work or something like that, they are to get their silent reading book. They are to read until I return. So I'll take these kids out, and the first thing is I'm not going to address the actual issue, because I don't know what preempted that issue. Probably because my proximity and my looking at them didn't fix the situation, that it's much more serious, or even slightly more serious than the typical side conversation. So going outside, I ask them, what's going on? And that gives them an opportunity to share with me what they feel like sharing with me, that's explaining the behavior. And sometimes they don't want to provide anything, and I say, well, I'm looking at this, and this is not like you to have this side conversation, so something must be going on. So you don't have to share it with me, but if I can help, please let me know. If you need to speak to a counselor, we can go that route as well. If you need a few minutes, you can take a few minutes and then come on back to class. But when you come back to class, I need you to be focused on class. I say thank you, and then I take them back in. Or if they need a few minutes, they come back in on their own. Now, if it continues, whether it continues that day or it continues within a day or two of the original conversation, I'm again going to start with my looking at them and my proximity. And if that again doesn't work, we're going to have another conversation outside. And this conversation is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to say, I know there's something going on, but I really need you to focus. And we talked about this yesterday, and it makes it really hard for me. So you're putting the issue on how it affects you. It makes it really hard for me to teach when you're having a side conversation with so-and-so. And it also makes the other students difficult for them to follow along with what I'm doing. So I really need you to be able to pay attention and not talk. Are you able to do that? So again, I'm not accusing, I'm not yelling, I am calm. I'm giving them a choice. Are you able to do that? Yes or no? And depending on what they say is how we'll handle it next. If they say no, then I'll say we need to have a little bit of a timeout. I have a partner teacher next door where we have arranged that timeouts can go. The kid just goes in there, sits in the back of the room. They usually have to get their silent reading book and go and read for a few minutes and then come back after about 5 to 7 minutes. If they say I can, great, come on back. I want you back in class, but I need you to be quiet. So when dealing with challenges, the main thing you never want to do is raise your voice. I know it's hard, and I know we all have done it, but when we've raised our voice, the kids have won. Now, there are times when you're going to have to raise your voice with really serious issues, but talking issues, texting issues, those are ones you don't want to raise your voice, because once you do, the kid has won. You also don't want to argue with the kid. It is not something you're going to argue. They're going to say, I wasn't texting or I wasn't talking. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to argue with you. I just need it to stop. No raising the voice. The moment you raise your voice, you have lost control. I also try to avoid sending kids to the office for discipline. Because again, you have lost control when you do that. I try to keep the kids in my classroom as much as possible. That also builds some kind of a trust back and forth, saying that I'm going to try to handle the problem and we're going to work it out together. But there are sometimes kids have done something that makes me so upset that I know I'm going to lose it. And so we both need a timeout from each other. And we have a place for that. For our school, it's called the Kindness Center. And a kid can go there for 5 to 7 minutes to calm down. And that gives me a time to calm down before the kid comes back and we can have our discussion. Normally, I like to have the discussion right away. But if I'm heated, I know that discussion is not going to be productive. So then I avoid the discussion right now. We have a timeout, and then they can come back. If the Kindness Center is not available, they have a limited number of kids they can take at a time, then I will put my partner classroom right next door into use and have the kid go in there for 5 to 7 minutes, and I will tell them to come on back in 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll have a conversation. So meet those challenges with questions rather than accusations, and that's going to go a little bit further than if you accuse kids of doing things or address the behavior right on. Now, sometimes they're going to give you no excuse at all, and then you're going to address the behavior. Then you're going to say, put it back on you and say, it's really difficult for me to teach when I have students talking along the side. Listen how I'm not accusing them. I am saying when students are talking or when students are texting on their phones. Those types of things. So I'm not accusing them directly. But there are times where kids will share with me what's going on, and they are justified in whatever's going on, and then I will handle it based on what they tell me. I remember many years ago when I taught high school, I had a kid who normally does not talk back to me, normally never gave me any issues, and this day, it was just like talk back, attitude, and it kept escalating. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck is this? So I asked him to step outside, and again, my question is, what's going on? And he shared with me that he thinks he might have gotten his girlfriend pregnant. I'm like, oh my gosh, you got 18 more years of problems. I said, okay, I get it. You're having a bad day. Why don't you go to the library? This school, we didn't have a place to send him. And if I sent him to the office, it would have been a discipline issue. And that's not what he needed. And the counselors weren't available at the time. So I said, why don't you go to the library, sit down, take some time, calm down. And when you think you're ready, come on back to class. There was no reason for me to address his attitude or his talking back because he was having a bad day. And when that bad day was over, the behavior was going to take care of itself. So there was no reason for me to discipline him. There was no reason for me to send him to the office. There was no reason for me to do anything other than give him a chance to work through his problem. Thankfully, he came to me a couple days later and said it was a false alarm. So that was a good thing. But what was good about that is because I asked that question, instead of yelling at him or accusing him of his behavior, we were able to move on. He got what he needed, and the behavior took care of itself. So those are some things you can do when you're challenging. Let's talk about bonus rewards. Now, if any of you have been following me at any length of time, you know I give class points and I give student points. So I give participation points where kids can buy personal things for rewards. And then I give class points where the class can buy class rewards. And usually, for every class activity that we complete without me having to stop or do any of those kinds of things, that goes smoothly, I give them a class point. For any points that I have to stop, I have to discipline, it doesn't go smoothly, I get the point. So it's me versus the class. And then at the end of the week, the points get tallied up and they get put into the class totals, and the kids can save their points or spend them as they wish. But to help with classroom management, I like to give bonus rewards. So normally it's 1 for 1. We've completed this activity. Let's say we're singing a song. You did it like you're supposed to do it, 1 point. You didn't do it like you're supposed to do it, I get the point. But if I notice we're having a problem, or this class has accrued a lot of negative points, I need to get them out of that situation. And they're not getting themselves out of that situation on their own. Like, noticing that they have negative 20 points isn't motivating them to, we got to behave to get the points up. So I'm going to start offering bonus points. So I'm going to start small so that my kids can have success. So let's say it's talking. Kids are not paying attention. They're having all these side conversations. And it's not 1 or 2 kids. It's a lot of kids. So I'm going to say, okay, class, if we can stay focused for the next 2 minutes, I will give you 3 bonus points on the board. 2 minutes, though. We got to stay quiet and focused on our activity for 2 minutes. If we can do that, I'll give you those 3 bonus points. Or let's say we're having trouble with silent reading, that kids are not reading their books. I say, if we can make it through our whole 5 minutes with everybody reading in Spanish like they're supposed to for the whole 5 minutes, I'll give you 5 bonus points. Or let's say we're having a problem with kids being prepared for class. Like, they're not having a pen, they're not having paper, all of those things. Now, I have extras of those things, but I'm trying to teach kids to be self-reliant and prepared. So I'll say, okay, guys, we've been having a lot of people been asking for pencils and paper lately. If everybody is prepared tomorrow, I'll give you the class 5 bonus points. So the point of this is to look at whatever issue the class as a whole is having and tell them if they can conquer that for at least a few minutes, then you can offer bonus points. And then if you've done the 2-minute one, and now you say, okay, we're going to go for 3 minutes, and then I'll give you 4 bonus points. And you work your way up. You can also do this on an individual basis. So if you're giving individual participation points, then you could say privately to a kid, I notice you've been having a lot of trouble talking with your neighbors this week. If you can be quiet this whole class period and not have any side conversations, I'll give you 10 bonus points, or whatever you want to give them. It's a way to motivate them to do what is expected in the classroom. And it's worked really, really well for me over the years. I have been using participation points and classroom points for many years, and I have had great success with both, and bonus points are just one additional aspect of that. Again, if anybody has any comments or questions, please feel to put it in the chat. And if you're watching this on the replay, please feel free to add to the comments. It does help, and I will be happy to answer any of those for you. Now we're going to go to our last topic, and this one I never knew about. This one I learned from my sisters, My sister is an elementary school teacher. She gave me a little bit about it, and then I did some research on it. I've never taught elementary school, but when I did the research, it was really interesting. This is a really common concept for elementary school, ebb and flow. And I did it naturally in some aspects. In other aspects, not so much. I ended up causing more problems until I understood how this thing worked. But subconsciously, I did it especially for my first period. I have never, in my 22 or how many years I've been teaching, have had a quiet first period. Never. Teachers have always talked, I've got a sleepy first period. I'm like, I have never had a sleepy first period in my life. And I now know why, because of this ebb and flow. I am excited in the morning. I scream out, Buenos dias, clase. I am animated. I am excited. There's no way a kid can be sleepy in my class. I am just going at 100% that first period. I didn't realize why I did it. Again, it was subconscious. But it was to energize them and get them up and moving. My problem was I did that every class. And especially classes after lunch, we did not need all that excitement. That just added to their sugar and their lunchtime excitement, and it just made those classes unbearable classroom management-wise. So when I was speaking with my... I can't speak. When I was speaking with my sister and then did the research, elementary school teachers know about the energy of their class. And they have the kids all day. So they have to work with their energy to get the energy to where they need it to be. If it's low, they animate themselves and do active activities to get the energy up. But if the kids' energy is high, then they do calming activities and quiet activities, and they're not as animated. They have a lower tone of voice and they're whispering to calm the kids down. So like my sister would say, after PE, when they had their PE time, they came back, she had a calming, quiet activity to bring them from the hyperness of PE back down to the calmness of the library in the classroom. She said she talked low, she was calm, she did not do, wild gestures. She calmed the class down with that. But in the mornings, when she needed to energize the kids, she had some active activities going. She was more animated with herself. So when they came back from the library, they're in the quiet mode. So she needed to animate them a little bit. So they had this ebb and flow. You look at your class and what energy level are they at and where do you need them to be? Are they at a 5 and you need them at a 3? Then you need to calm yourself down. Talk softly. Talk slower. Use less gesturing and animation to calm them down. And subconsciously, the kids will calm down. Are they at a 0 or a 1 and you need them at a 3? Then you need to animate yourself. You need to get a little bit louder to get them up to the 3. You never want your kids at a 0 or a 1, and you never want your kids at a 4 or 5. You want them in that middle section, a 2 to a 3. That's where you're headed for in there. And so whatever they come into your classroom as, you need to do the opposite. So if they're at a 5, as PM is saying, if they're at a 5, then you're coming in calm. So if I notice, like after lunch, so our lunch comes in after 4th period. So my 5th period class, I'm calm. I'm quiet. We talked about music earlier. I might be playing some calming music to calm them down because I already know that they're going to be hyper from lunch. They're just been with their friends. They've had sugar invariably. They are going to be hyper. So I'm having some calming. I look at my playlist. I will play. We only have 3-minute passing periods, so I know that's one song. I'll find a calming song from my playlist. I'll play. I'm going to talk at a softer tone. I'm going to talk more slowly. I'm going to say buenas tardes, clase. Instead of buenas tardes, clase, I'm going to calm myself down that allows them to calm themselves down. I might also start with a quiet activity like silent reading to start them off because that's a calming activity. Or you can do a mindfulness activity, a breathing activity. Our counselors are famous for coming into our classrooms. If we invite them, they say, we're doing our mindful minutes this week. Would you like us to come in and show you and your kids how to do that? And then I look at certain class periods and go, I need it this period, and that period. And I invite them to come in and we all take that mindfulness minute. And that can help calm the class down. What you don't want to do is yell. What you don't want to do is raise your voice. What you don't want to do is get all excited. You want to do the opposite of what your kids are doing. And subconsciously, the majority of kids will follow suit. They're going to match the energy that you are showing. So if they are high energy, you want to be low energy. If they are low energy, you want to be high energy. That's what you want because you're trying to get them to be in that 2-3 area to where the energy is enough to be engaged, but not too much to where it's distracting them from learning. And you don't want it to be too low to where they get bored or get sleepy. So that's a great question. Any other questions? Because those are my 5 classroom management hacks. While you're thinking about that, I want to tell you, as we're getting close, especially as I told you, that I am starting back to school next week. I'm starting my back to school boot camp. You can read more about it and sign up at mm.us/bootcamp. It is a 10 webinar series that mostly is on Saturdays. We start this Thursday, and then afterwards, we're doing them on consecutive Saturdays until we finish, 2 to 3 every Saturday. And they cover all the things that you need to get started for back to school, be prepared, and be ready for that. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go and check it out. If you can't participate live, no worries. We will record all the sessions and you'll have access to the classes through September of next year, of 2024. So you'll have plenty of time for a whole year to have access to them. And as I said, they are 10 webinars that cover things from your classroom layout, classroom procedures, classroom management, first day, first week, first month, back to school night. Those are just some of the things that we'll be talking about. You can read more about it there at mm.us/bootcamp. As I said, we'll be starting on Thursday, but if you can't start right away, no worries. We'll be recording all of the classes. So just want to send that out there for everybody. I know we don't want to think about back to school. Some of us are going back to school at the beginning of August. Some of us not until the beginning of September, but it's coming up quick. And with that, if you found this useful, I would greatly appreciate it if you would hit the like button and subscribe if you're not, and share with other teachers so other people can benefit from our weekly lives at 5. So we'll be back again next week, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I will see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.